哦，现在有了，现在有了。
现在有了。OK，好，好，好。
测试麦克风。
行，麦克风。吗？
可以，可以。
你别干那。
我现在戴耳机帮王老师听着，能听到我讲话吗？
可以。
可以是吧？好的，好嘞，好嘞，好的，好的，好，好，谢谢。拜拜。哦，这好了。这样小对了。
啊，好，好，
来，好，是。可能您需要戴耳机。
then there's another, but everything's small over. They never had their foot. What I see this last over this 18 months, they're so people are thinking, economy is not good, situations to go.
So Hong Kong people are very resilient. Yeah, I mean, we don't have anywhere to go. Then we just move on. Yeah,
That's what I said.
well, well, that's good.
This time, the focus because of our DC and hosts are calling in. So yesterday we did the panels, and then in the afternoon, Saturday, biological science and arts, the applied, and also 8, 9 years. And then this morning, and long lunch. I full president bio in the morning. It's really something.
Too bad they lost the managers. They were very gung ho in managers.
But they talked to me that over the medical school, they give you 1 commitment. Think of all the whole patient. They're saying they have to
They're
do
all
release.
Yeah, except the medicine.
Yeah.
So it's very natural that they do managers.
But what people highlight health in terms of
Yeah,
bringing
yes, they're
students
radiology, they're nursing school.
and credentialing
Yeah.
and then producing something to the market.
But it is not us to design. So it's Beijing design. So
Beijing design for us. So are they
Beijing
more
design.
like that?
Medical school is a big thing. I thought you were you are a Chinese expert, China expert.
No.
No.
I am a foreign, what, a curious foreign.
Yeah, actually, went through Beijing design. So, but it's sad for them, and they put up money. They basically say that I don't need government money, I can bank loan. But still, they lost it.
Well, as you know, they're not giving up.
Well,
They're moving on to the next thing.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and friends. On behalf of the Center on Contemporary China and the World, known as the CCCW at Hong Kong U, welcome to today's event, Chinese Encounters with America. I'm Li Cheng, the director of the CCCW. In recent months, we have seen a tentative stabilization in U.S.-China bilateral relationship, marked by renewed head of state diplomacy and cooperative steps on issues such as trade disputes. At the same time, structural tensions remain. Escalating technological competition, intensify security concerns in the Indo-Pacific, and the divergent narrative around the global governance have created an environment in which the relationship is neither returning to its early cooperation nor moving inevitably toward confrontation, but instead entering a more fluid and potentially persistent era that requires vigilant management on both sides. Against this backdrop, today's event brings together two conversations that speak directly to the past, present, and the future of U.S.-China relations. One through the lens of personal journeys, cultural encounters, and cross-generational perspectives, and the other through the broader geopolitical dynamics. At a time when channels of communication and exchanges face unprecedented constraints, it is essential that institutions like ours create space for open dialogue, historical reflection, strategic reasoning, and cross-cultural understanding. We choose to call these two conversations as a dual-line dialogues for two reasons. First, one is offline here in Hong Kong, and the other is online, virtually connecting to Beijing, and Professor Wang is there. Secondly, we look at the China-US bilateral relationship or Chinese encounters with America from the above-mentioned different threads. We simply cannot find the better speakers on these intellectual adventures than our two guests today. First, I'm delighted and honored to welcome my 3-decade-long dear friend, Deborah Davis, Professor Emerita of Sociology at Yale University. Debbie, I have so many fond memories in the streets of Shanghai, at Yale, at Brookings, and also here in Hong Kong many times, and at many conference venues around the world. I also remember seeing you on TV in April 2006 when President Hu Jintao visited Yale. Professor Davis is the co-editor of the newly published book, Chinese Encounters with America. This is actually cover of the ping pong team arrived in, I think in Japan, right? In Detroit, okay, great. So we talk about all these names. This is my favorite people, Zhang Dedong, many others, Lin Huiqing, Zheng Mingzi, and etc. I can know almost all of them, maybe except one or two. And this is a book. It's really quite remarkable that it illuminates how the experience of 12 distinguished Chinese individuals, from scholars, engineers, and diplomats, to artists, athletes, and philanthropists, have influenced China's quest for modernization and involving engagement with the world. These compelling personal narratives remind us that US-China relations are not just state-to-state relations, but also people-to-people, whose lives and aspiration have been shaped through encounters across borders. David, really honored to have you here with us today. One of these 12 featured Chinese intellectuals in the book is Professor Wang Jisi, founding president of the Institute of International and Strategic Studies, and the chair professor emerita at the Peking University, and also honorary president of the Chinese Association for American Studies. Professor Wang served as the director of the Institute of American Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences for 12 years, and the dean of the School of International Relations at the Peking University for 8 years. He has been widely seen as the dean of American Studies in China and the China-US relations. In addition to helping Chinese better understand the United States politics, economy, society, culture, and the worldview, Dean Wang has also played an indispensable role in helping the world understand the complexities of US-China relations over the several decades, offering measured, historical, and empirical grounded perspective at the moments of both cooperation and confrontation. I should also add that Professor Wang is another 3-decade-long dear friend of mine. I first met Professor Wang at the University of Michigan in 1990. I remember vividly when he was a visiting scholar there. I gave a job talk. About 20 years ago, when I was a professor at the Hamilton College, I invited Professor Wang and Professor David Lampton, and Dean Lampton, a professor at the Johns Hopkins University Science, known as the Dean of China Study in the United States, to have a fireside chat. I have a photo. Could someone help me to show that photo? Could you say, yeah, This is the first one. It's Hamilton College, October 2006, 19 years ago in upstate New York. The other one we took just a few weeks ago in Hong Kong, and both deans came to town and for a conference. And this is really quite remarkable that the two deans end up between about 2 decades. Jisi, I'm excited about our fireside chat and this afternoon. Joining Professor Davis in the first part of the program is our own Zhang Yifan, a predoctoral fellow at the CCCW and a PhD candidate at the Johns Hopkins. Yifan brings a unique perspective formed by growing up in China and studying and living in the United States since her teenage years. Her brand of academic training and the life experience, as well as her intriguing lens as a young and upcoming scholar in the field, makes her an excellent moderator for the discussion. Now, please note that today's event is on the record and is being live streamed on our Hong Kong U CCCW and also our YouTube channel. And the WeChat channel is named 香港大学当代中国与事件研究中心 CCCW WeChat public account. I just checked before I came here. It's already several hundred people. We invite you to subscribe to our Scholar Media channels for updates on upcoming events and the publication. Actually, we have 2 or 3 events per week lately. Now, please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Deborah Davis on the stage. Please, she will give keynote. Then for my conversation with Professor Wang, we just start with the Q&A. Please. Thank you.
So I push escape. Oh, it's gone. Thank you, Li. Can you hear me? So, Li Cheng, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you all for coming. I recognize some people in the room, and then I know there are hundreds out there that I don't know. Welcome to this afternoon's program. I've got about 15 minutes. I'm going to give an overview of the book, and then Yifan is going to ask me more questions, and we'll have dialogue. So some of the questions have been sent to me in advance, and I will answer them as I go through it. First, I want to begin by saying about the history of this book, and it begins with a book by Terry Lautz, which was published in 2022, and it is called Americans in China. It's a selection of 12 Americans, starting with Senator Judd, who actually was a medical missionary in China and then goes on to be a major force in the US Congress in anti-communist McCarthyite America. And it goes through to tell the story of Melinda Liu, who some of you may know, who is a Chinese American who returns to China for various reasons and ends up being the major journalist and still is in Beijing. So Terry's book, which he wrote after he retired from the Luce Foundation, uses these 12 stories to give an account of US-China relations. It really functions as a textbook for Americans. He gave the book talk right after COVID. It was on a hybrid event, and I was in the audience. I had seen the YouTube interview. I thought it was fantastic. I read the book. I thought the book was fantastic. And after his live talk at Yale, I asked him if he planned to do the sequel or the mirror, which instead of Americans in China is Chinese in America. But it's encounters. We're not talking about immigrants or sojourners. We're talking about people who spent critical time in the US but returned to China and changed China. And Terry initially wasn't interested. Then he said he'd do it if I would help him. So we agreed to do this in partnership. One of the first things we do to choose who would be the 12 Chinese. Can I just move it ahead with with an arrow? No, the arrows don't. It's better to use the arrow than the mouse. Oh, it doesn't make any difference. Is it gonna, no, no, I'm sorry, but if I can have okay, now which arrow will let it forward? That's the best one. This one. Okay, good. Got it. Thank you very much. So this is the cover of the book that Li Cheng just showed you. This is the product of that conversation in spring of 2022. And last May, 3 years later, we had this book. It's 12 profiles of 12 individuals in different occupations. When we were choosing the people to whom will be featured, and that's what I'm going to walk through very quickly, I went to Li Cheng. He was one of the first. And I said, who are 5 people in China who are famous that Americans need to know about? I asked the same question to several other friends. We also reflected based on people we had met. And we came up with these 12 people who are in 10 different occupations, and they are in different generations. So it is possible to say this is a generational story. The larger sociological piece of this, and when I do more analytic PPTs, it's about how the context, the geopolitical and the domestic political context in which a Chinese person, a man or a woman, first knows about America, encounters America in China, as it were, then their experience in the United States, and then their experience in China afterwards. In some cases, the experience in the US was positive. Other cases, it's negative. Sometimes in China, having those connections to the United States boosts your career. In other times, it holds you back. And the purpose of writing this book is for the American public who would read this book first to understand the depth of talent in China in these different occupations and the multiple ways in which these extraordinary men and women have changed China since 1980. But for the older ones, there's a story that goes back before 1980, but the focus is really on this last 40 years. Okay, so that's what the book looks like. Oh, I should say, whoops. So this is in Detroit in 1972. Those of you who know about the ping pong diplomacy, it started by accident in 1971 when the American ping pong player, Glenn Cowan, I think is his name, got on the wrong bus. And he met the Chinese delegation, and the Chinese said, come and visit us. And they did. The Americans went to China. And then this is the official return visit in 1972. So this is Piling, Pekong. This is before Serembang are still there. This is before there's diplomatic relations. And here we see a delegation arriving in Detroit. So let me just first talk about this first group. These are 3 very distinguished people who come from elite families, who had college education, who had parents who had college education, in some cases had grandparents with even PhDs. Nobody is saying these are representative, but they're extraordinary people whom we wanted to introduce to the American reading public. Because one of the things that for me is very important is many Americans feel that right now, these last 10 years, is the first time innovative global leaders have emerged from China. This has sort of just happened since 1980, particularly since 1992. And one of what we are illustrating with these 3 people was there were extraordinarily globally connected and prominent and people in science and education and in medicine and arts before 1949. So this is not China's first time to really be in a dominant position on the global stage. And this is important as an American, for me, to tell other Americans. To you, it's probably self-evident, but it's not self-evident to many of our readers. Okay, so first one is Ji Chaozhu, and the author is Charles Hayford. How many people in this room know who Ji Chaozhu is? Yes, very few. So you can see, however, here's Ji Chaozhu next to Mao. This is Edgar Snow. He's the interpreter. Charles Hayford is a retired professor of history who worked on the Republican period. Ji Chaozhu is someone who was sent to the United States by the party. His brother was an underground party member, and the idea was that this family would move to New York and kind of work underneath. But sorry, I'm just going to pull this. Ji Chaozhu himself was a child. He was only 9 years old at the time, and he went to middle school, he went to high school in Manhattan, and they went to Harvard College. He is then called back, and he is a translator at the Korean armistice talks. His life, you'll see, unravels in certain ways, but he ends up as the Chinese ambassador to the UK. So this is a very important person, and it's very interesting that so few people under the age of let's say 50 know who he is. We'll get to this, what it means to write about people who others don't know, but he's a major player, and I hope you enjoy the chapter. Next one is the chapter that I wrote with another sociologist, Richard Madsen. This is Xie Xide. How many people know Xie Xide? Oh, same people who knew Ji Chaozhu. When I gave this book talk last Sunday in Shanghai, everybody knew. Xie Xide was the first female president of Fudan University. She's known as the mother of the semiconductor. She's the one whose grandfather and grandfather both had PhDs in physics from the United States. She herself has a PhD from MIT in physics. She is an extraordinary person. And it was a joy to write this chapter. I had never written a biography about or written about an individual whom I couldn't interview. So this also was a very interesting experience where I mainly worked with documentary materials and things via the link, live performances, and listening to other people interview. I also had a form of her biography, Dick and I, and Dick had actually met her. So Xie Xide is a major player. She was in 3 Politburos too, because she was the head of the Shanghai Zhangxie. She was also in the Central Committee, in New York, in Beijing. So she is a major player. The next is Zi Zhinyun. How many people know Zi Zhinyun? Say, oh, more. That's really interesting. Oh, and people under 30. Okay, we might get to this in Q&A, why you know her and you don't know the others. Okay, I've got 5 minutes to get through the rest of the book. And Steve Levine is an American historian who started studying Russia and then wrote about China. And he wrote a biography of Zi Zhinyun, which he put in a drawer. And so we convinced Steve that he could write the essay for us. The next group, it starts with Wang Jisi. You're going to meet Wang Jisi if you haven't met him. And Li Chang has already talked about him. Mike Lampton, David M. Lampton, you've seen the picture. So here we have the American IR specialist who is connected to the Chinese IR and American specialist, and Mike is writing Wang Jisi's story. So that's the first. This is the group who are born he's born just before 49, but they're born in the 50s. Many of them are sent down youth. So Wang Jisi went first to Inner Mongolia, then he was a worker. So he enters Beida at age 30 as a married man. So and here we have our Hong Kong person. How many know Margie Yang? That's interesting. Okay, so Margie is from an old Shanghai family. Her grandfather owned and created one of the major pre-49 silk textile empires in Shanghai. Her father was the adopted son-in-law, and both of them were sent to the United States to get degrees in textile. Margie, however, was born in Hong Kong, went to the United States at age 14 for boarding school, and then she is called back when her father is failing, and she becomes the CEO of Esquel in 1995. In this particular chapter, you'll see it takes it right through because Esquel is in cotton. They are using Xinjiang cotton of the highest quality, and there are all kinds of issues about where your company will go. And this is a Harvard Business School case study, so the reason we could get Bill Kirby to write this was because they had done a lot of work, and he knows her. Now, whoops. Oh, wrong person. Sorry. Okay, now this is Zhang Ye. I'm not going to ask everybody if you know them or not. Maybe that will come up. So Zhang Ye is in the NGOs. So she was also a sent down youth. She also went to Inner Mongolia. Her father was a university professor. She came back as a Gungnong Bing student and in English. And she worked for CITS, where she met her first Americans in China. And then after her career, as it matures, she goes to the Ford Foundation, Asia Foundation, China Medical Board. In other words, she leaves Tijernay and moves into this NGO sector, which was thriving at the height of her career. And the person we have writing is Elizabeth Knupp, who was also head of Johns Hopkins SAIS in Nanjing, but was the head of Ford Foundation for 10 years in Beijing, and so had worked with Zhang Ye. I don't need to say anything about who is Lang Ping, but I do need to flag Susan Brownell. Susan Brownell is also an academic, but she is an athlete. And when she was a graduate student in China, she competed for the Chinese I think it's actually a 学院, as a track and field star. Susan now is a nationally ranked senior ice skater, and she's done color commentary for the Olympics. So again, what we benefit for and what we are trying to do in this collection of essays is bring someone who's within the occupation to do the profile. So as we've seen, the NGO person, the sports writer, or person who knows sport not as a writer, but also as an athlete herself. And I think she brings that to the Lang Ping very successfully. And then the last person, Yang Meiqi, is my age. So she's out of order in terms of age. She is graduated just on the cusp of the Cultural Revolution. So she's sent down as a teacher, and you can see she's a dancer. So she is as a child, she was born in Chongqing. She went back to Shanghai. The family is a really bourgeois family. And she goes to the Central Dance Academy in Beijing. So her teachers are Russian. She learns folk dance, etc. Modern dance. This is about modern dance. And the person we have writing it, Emily Wilcox, it went to Harvard as a college, but she's a dancer. And when she had her Fulbright in Beijing, she was at the Central Dance Academy, and her thesis book is about dance in China. She is currently, her big piece is also about global dance. And one of the key things about Yang Meiqi is I am going to talk for about 5 more minutes, and we'll have 5 less minutes less for Q&A, is the way in which the diaspora functions. So, I mean, the diaspora is, the Chinese diaspora is important for many, many people. If we go back to Xie these Tranzhou people from Fujian who are connected to people in the Philippines, connected to people in Southeast Asia, when it comes time to get an airplane ticket or shipping, that network is absolutely important. The role of the diaspora, which used to be called 56 million, I think now it's 75 million, is absolutely critical to Chinese encounters with America and US-China relations. And this is illustrated in this book through the dance, as opposed to the usual way in which that theme is pursued. Okay, the last group are those who come of age after 2000, when the world is open. And if you want to go to America, that's fine, and you can choose to go to America. It's what fits with your personal plan. So this last group is very different than the first group, who were very often sent for the sake of the nation and were intensely patriotic, came back and were not appreciated in the 1950s, 60s, but come into their real moment of influence in the 80s. Then you have that middle generation, and these are the ones after 2000. They're different birth dates, but that's the group you're going to quickly see for the end of the book. So the first person is my former colleague at Yale, Dengxing Wang, and the chapter is written by my former student at Yale, who worked in his lab. Abby is now a professor at Vassar, and Dengxing Wang has left the United States and returned to China. Xing Wang is the only rural-born person. He came from a village in western Hunan that had no electricity. One of the serendipitous things, Dengxing Wang was the youngest person in Qibajie. He was 16. And Wang Jisi was the oldest person in Tibet. So we have two of these amazing people who followed different pathways through the restoration of the Gaokao and made enormous contributions. And we can talk about Dengxing Wang. He's a biologist. He went to Beida. Then he went to UC Berkeley. He's a presidential scholar. He had 2 labs. When I was running with him the Yale Beijing program, we had students in labs on both sides. Visited the labs, and then in 2014 he resigned from Yale. He is full-time dean at Beida, and now he has this whole campus in Shandong, which is where this picture was taken. The next person was also born in 1962. Sorry, too many. Don't need to say who she is. You know who she is, I'm sure, this influencer. And of course, she's from a princeling family. She's our only princeling, princess. So this is the foreign minister's stepdaughter, who also was sent to the United States, like Ji Chaozhu, as a child for China's foreign ministry to create experts within the Chinese elite to help understand English speaking and particularly to understand America. She has a very interesting career. She's at one point married to Cheng. She is extraordinary. And Melinda, who was featured in the first book, is the person who wrote. So in this case, you've got a journalist writing about an influencer and a journalist. So again, we're matching the authors. The last 2 are the youngest. Ma Tianjie is born in 1982. The first 2 are 62. So then we're jumping 20 years. But all 4 of these people have the opportunity to look at what was on offer after the year 2000 and decide what they wanted to do. They were making choices. They were going forward. This is true of this amazing man who I know and worked with from the Hunan village all the way to where he is now. And he made those choices all along the way, even though certainly the restoration of the Gaokao and a national system to identify talent put him on the track. But after that, he was the one who made decision after decision. And one could definitely say that of Hong Kong. And now we get to Ma Tianjie, who also went to Beida from Shanghai. And there he became a vegetarian and an environmental activist. He worked for Greenpeace. He's now back in Beijing, where he's writing a book on the Chinese environmental movement. And Lily Pike is a Harvard graduate who, as a young investigative reporter, is interested in environmental issues of China. So she knows Ma as a friend. So again, this is someone who's in the area, in the same generation, writing and sharing his story and how he is encountered. The last is the musician. Some of you know my husband is a musician. I'm surrounded by musicians. So of course, I think musicians are absolutely central to any kind of exchange, and the idea of a unbounded global partnerships with peers. So Hong Kong was initially supposed to be the next Long Long. He is recruited Yo-Yo Ma. He's a prodigy from Nanjing. And so at 9 years old, he and his family moved to New York. And he went to the High School for Performing Arts, for Children Performing Arts, and started at Juilliard. So he did Juilliard prep, BA, and then he decides he doesn't want to be Long Long, even though he's starting to get those offers to travel. He wants to be a composer. So in 2014, the same year that Dengxing Wang decides to return to China, Peng Peng, he's known, also decides he is now the resident composer in the Shanghai Philharmonic. And last year when I was in Chengdu, was Symphony Number 12 was going to be performed the day after I left. So again, this is a case in which I'm finding in just my own life the multiple ways through these different occupations we are connecting and continue to connect. And the book is written, or this essay is written by 2 amazing people, Sheila Melvin and Cai Jindong. They're a couple. You may have read their books on music in China. So Jindong is a conductor who conducts in China, but he's the head of the Bard Chinese orchestra, which is another orchestra. And Sheila was a staff writer for Stanford Business School and is also representative, is the last thing I'm going to say, because Yifan asked me, how did you make the match? I hope I've explained to you how we chose the subjects, why we thought the subjects were important, how we matched the authors to the people. So these are all people on the writer side who are deeply engaged in the profession, music, dance, athletics, business, and therefore they are writing in a different way than they would in a way than an academic. They are writing from within, trying to bring the stories of these profiles of these extraordinary people who all did encounter America in a very extended way, except for Yang Meiqi. The dancer is this example where she only briefly comes to the United States, but in that she's met by Ai Weiwei and Tan Dun when she first arrives. They show her New York. She doesn't speak a word of English. They get her to North Carolina, where she enters ADF, the American Dance Foundation's training ground, and then the diaspora takes over, and you see modern dance moving, and the dancer operating in a way that's unexpected. If you looked at her early career, definitely not a top-down decision on how her talent should be displayed or used. And that's partly what we want to bring out, is the multiple avenues that have been available. The roads are often can be rocky, but that there are on both sides in this we're talking this dyadic relationship within the United States, people who are deeply, deeply connected to their peers in China. And that at this moment of geopolitical tension, this kind of deep connection with your peers is one of the things that gives people like me some optimism and also energy to hopefully have a better future than where we are right now. What's it here? Oh, sure.
All right, shall we start? All right, thank you, Dr. Li Cheng, for your wonderful opening remarks, and Professor Davis for your insightful overview of the book and the amazing stories you've just shared. Good afternoon, everyone, both here in person and those who are joining us online. My name is Zhang Yifan. I'm a predoctoral fellow at CCCW. It's truly my honor today to moderate the conversation with Professor Davis. And please, let me congratulate you on this new volume. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and I was really struck by the richness of detail this book brings to life. As you ask, many people would know Professor Xie Xide or Dr. Xie Xide as the first female president of Fudan, but very few would know her as a huge fan of Boston Red Sox team, right? So I think, moments like this really persisted as I was reading the book. And I also have many questions. You've addressed some of them in your introduction. So I would like to start by zooming out the scope a little bit by asking you about the timing of this project. So as Professor Li Cheng mentioned in his introduction, the relationship between China and the US is entering this, what he calls fluid phase, right? So why did you feel now was the right moment to tell these stories?
It wasn't so obvious, quote, it's the right moment. That is, it was really personal. I read his book, and I wasn't going to go to do China, to do research in China. I was teaching at Schwartzman. I never planned to write another book, but the format was a book, and it was profiles. So as I said, I think the motivation was to bring stories of
people who have had amazing lives, and yet the course of their life, those details that you mentioned that we do have there in the book, to ground it. So these were grounded stories in a period when US-China relations was deteriorating. Now, with the moment it's been published, they've deteriorated beyond what I expected in 2022. And therefore it seems to have even more meaning. Does that seem what you have on your mind?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I think, this book really serves as a counter narrative of
Right.
what people are, turning their beliefs of, in terms of how they perceive US-China relations. So let's pivot to the book itself. So the book is organized in a chronological order, right? From the, in terms of how the timeline of how when they arrived in America.
Yes.
Right.
I'm trying to
I
check.
think from Ji Chaozhu's first arrival in New York in
Sure.
the late 1930s to Peng Peng Gong's first year at Juilliard School in early 2000s.
Although that if you think about Madame Zi, hers is quite late. So it's not the case that the older people all had the pre-49. So
Right.
what you really have is Ji Chaozhu is a child who comes in the 30s. And the fact that he experienced America in the 30s shapes what happens to him. Xie Shide, comes in 1947, 48. That's another moment.
Mhm.
America is still the ally. By the time she's finished in 51, the American policy is that Chinese science students are not allowed to go back to China. It's flipped. China's been from the ally to China's the enemy. And then if we move to Madame Zi, she's not really until much later. She's the 80s. So actually, they are, by their birth dates, a cohort that are grouped together. But if we think about when they met America,
Mhm.
they actually are three very different points in time.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the differences of time, right?
Eh.
And I was just wondering, how do you think the meaning of encountering America has evolved over time?
That's really hard. I'm a sociologist, so I'm not going to generalize at that level. I will stress that there are two things happening. One is how America is understood while people are growing up and going to school in China, right? And you do see that, and we talk about that with some of them, like Zhang, the NGO leader from Ford. She had been educated totally since 1950s. She was a Gonglongbing student. And these Americans were the ogres and Americans were the enemy. And then when she's a CITS tour guide, she meets her first Americans, and they're nothing like the ogres that she thought they were going to be. They were very handsome young men who could speak Chinese, and it was like a revelation. I mean, then so there's a whole piece of this book that interests me in particular, which is how America is understood as one is growing up, and that varies at the moment. And that's part of the story. And in these profiles, we do play with that theme. So that's one piece. And then we talk about what are the conditions in the United States at which you will encounter America. What is the racism? What is the violence? What are the negative things that are happening? And that also, of course, has an impact in different ways. And this younger generation who could come, I think I would like to go to America. Oh, good idea. Let's like go online and see what I can apply for. And oh, there's a fellowship. I will go. And then you're there and you discover, well, they have this problem and they have this problem. So I don't think you can generalize, but each of these profiles definitely gives detail, as you said, so that the American reader, for whom it's the focus, will reflect on the fact that these encounters with America will be shaped by how America was presented to them before they left and the character of their experience in America. And that's an argument that is rarely made, right? Instead, there are these global comments. What do Chinese think of America? What does America think of the Chinese? And as a sociologist, this is not enough. So this book is trying to say, go deeper and think about it, but think about it in a structural way, right? It's not just little stories. I mean, we do have an argument in that respect.
Right. I think that's also the reason you chose the term encounter instead of meets, right? I think encountering also encompasses or entails more emotional weights to it than just meeting with Americans. Well,
For
my
sure.
next question.
Encounter is very important, although
Yes.
if you look at Terry's subtitle, he had encounters there also. So yes, in English, encounter is a very generative word.
So I think, as you brought up in your overview of the book, so one very important theme that runs through the book is education. And over the past decades, several decades, China-US educational exchanges have really generated immense energy and nurtured generations of talent that have, like the book tells the stories, right? They have shaped China's quest for modernization and globalization. And also wanted to ask, if you can share your thoughts on how these journeys have also shaped America and American communities, or how Americans perceive Chinese people or Chinese society.
So again, the sociologist isn't going to talk about too generalized. We're going to keep our focus on these people to illustrate the point that as Americans meet people who are coming from outside America in general, and you've had this experience, in the last, I would say 40, 50 years, it's generally a fairly good welcome within the context of the educational setting. American education is a place that is structured to bring in non-native born talent, right? And the hope is especially if you're at the higher levels of graduate training, that this talent is actually going to stay in the United States. So I'm not saying, and you've experienced it, that it's always a warm welcome and that it isn't unpleasant and there aren't misunderstandings. But in general, if we're in the educational environment, Chinese students, people coming to the United States as students, it's seen as a positive. Now, these last 6 months, we're in a different place. Although I will say, based on what's happened at Yale in these last semester, when I actually took a course with students, I had a tutor, I interacted. People are not feeling a negative at all. They still feel, because those who they're working with embrace cross-national, international education. And the other thing, of course, Chinese students aren't the only international students in this mix. We're talking about the contemporary period. And to answer the question at the long term, it would be another lecture.
Well, my colleagues waving at me, so let's now open up the floor to the audience for Q&A. Please raise your hand, and please also introduce yourself briefly before asking the question.
Hi, thank you. I think it's really an interesting study. I'm Jane. I'm from the Faculty of Education. I'm a doctoral student here. And my study actually involves the integration of international faculty who work in mainland China. So I think it's a kind of different. So I'm quite interested in these interviews. What kind because I'm more interested in the cross-cultural communication. So among my study, I find the kind of like cognitive transformation, if I would say that. It's like there more tolerance to uncertainty, to the non-duality, and a few different interpretation towards democracy, towards liberty, towards freedom. So my question involves, in your interview, have you find like any cognitive shift of these brilliant Chinese who work in, or who study in US because I also got international educational background. So for myself, I could feel that. But for myself, I think it's more like integration. It's not bring something or learn something here. So yeah. I would like.
Sure, it's a wonderful question. This material can't answer that question, right? This is not, if you read the chapters, you'll see this is a much more historical, introducing these people's lives and the different positions they held. There is nothing in there. I think Wang Jisi, and you'll hear him, he is, I think, one of the only ones who has explicitly talked about what it meant to be in America. For the others, it's more that we know they spent time there, and because these people are not being interviewed. These are profiles written by people outside, and they are matched, and the subjects know that we are doing this book. They know that but they are not being interviewed. That's not, I shouldn't say it. Zhang Ye is because Elizabeth was a very good friend of hers, and so she had conversations with Zhang Ye, but this is not working at the level at which appropriately one can work, but this material is not going to be able to answer that question.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Tony Zhao, pre-doc fellow at CCCW, which is briefly met. I think it's a fascinating stories of the individuals in U.S.-China relationship, their personal stories. I want to quote a Chinese scholar who once said, Chairman Mao has 3 American friends, at least that we know, right? These are Americans in China during the revolutionary ages. And he said he had no Soviet Union friends that we know of. It's his data, not mine. So if we want to think about the interplay between personal relationships, personal stories versus geopolitical tensions, we're not as close to the Cold War eras, at least. So we think about the interplay between personal relationships versus geopolitics. How would you comment on, what are the things that kept Americans and Chinese being, friendships, even during extreme political tensions? Think about the Cold War years, revolutionary years. I think the data that the Chinese scholar presented was very striking and counterintuitive. So I'm just curious, after your chronological study of different generations, what are your thoughts on the things that kept us together during difficult times? Thank you.
Right. I can speak to that generally. It's not that each one of these profiles is going to give you an answer, right? So that's one reason I ended by emphasizing peers, that if we look back at when the estrangement was so extreme, from 1951 until 1972 or even 78, there's, I would say, the biggest continuation are the family connections, right? So this piece with the diaspora, right? And that we build on later, that these kinship ties that are made, and decades go by with no communication, but they reconnect. So for America, these connections through good times and bad times, geopolitically, through family, are really, really important. The professional ones in the 50s, the 60s, and 70s are harder to, you can't maintain them and they age out in a way. However, if you look at the Xie De piece, she is an example of how the scientists that she knew before 49 and the scientists that she then befriended, her students, this kind of professional respect and peer, I would say in Xie De is another way we see how that connection is made. And I would generalize, and that's drawing more on what I'm experiencing, and that's one justification for this spread of occupations. So it's definitely true of the musicians. It's definitely true of the dancers. And I think it's true in my experience, as we have ups and downs, is when I first went to China in 1980s, I had no peers, right? I mean, I was supposedly sponsored by Fei Xiaotong, and I met him in New York, and there was a kerfuffle to get the visa. Ultimately, I got the visa, and I only saw him again at the farewell banquet after I'd been in China for 4 months. So, there were no peers. Even when I started doing a random sample in 86, 87, and 88, I was dealing with union people who wanted to advance social welfare, right? But we weren't peers. They had no sense of academic work. Whereas now I have personally, hundreds and within the field. So this is something when the geopolitical gets bad, people who have these shared professional ties, they could be cut off, but they will resume because we have these deep shared interests and training. And it's going to be different for the athletes and different for them. But that's what I think is a cement, the glue that the changes after 1980 have now made possible and will not be erased or devastated the way they were in 1952 when the two countries, or 51, when they went to war. That really sabotaged for 30 years. And so only family ties were able to resume and produce that loyalty and that trust and the ability to work together. But now I think we have it very, very deep resources to keep those kinds of connections.
All right. I'm sorry, we're running out of time, and so now we can continue the conversation later. Please, Professor Cheng.
So please give a round of applause. Thank you so much, Debbie and Yifan, for your fascinating conversation. I hope that the next conversation will be as meaningful and as stimulating as yours. Now, please welcome Professor Wang to the screen.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Could
Thank
you
you
hear
very
me?
much. Can you
Okay,
hear
great.
me? Yes, I hear you quite all right.
Okay, great. Now we moved from a sociologist to a political scientist, from personal to strategic, from past to the future. So I will ask 4 questions or deal with 4 topics, maybe each with a number of questions. Namely, the first is a strategic perception, as the title suggests. Number 2 is a structure or polarity of the present-day international landscape. Number 3, the prospect of the dynamics and tensions in the US domestically under Trump 2.0. And finally, the significance, maybe also the limitations of people-to-people exchange. In addition, towards the end, I will ask 6 short questions, only require 1 word. It's the percentage of probability on 5 or 6 major issues. Now, the first one on the strategic perception. Last month, the White House released the 2025 National Security Strategy of the United States. Some critics, both inside and outside US, characterized it as full of contradictions, especially regarding to China. Now, this has reaffirmed the prevailing view over the past decade that the United States only has an attitude, no strategy towards China. Now, Professor Wang, what do you think? Do you agree that the criticism, and how will you take the new report? Please.
Well, thank you very much, Li Cheng. And I also was very interested in what I heard from Professor Davis. I very much appreciate her contribution to the book. And the other co-author was Terry Laus, also a very good friend of mine. So direct to your question, I do think the United States has attitude toward China, but it also has strategies toward China. But it is difficult to define the strategy, especially the current strategy of the United States, the Trump administration's strategies toward China. So this strategy is partly reflected in the document you mentioned, that is a national security strategy report of the United States White House just released. I agree with the comment that I read by Dr. Ferguson, Niels Ferguson, among other comments and reports. I think he says that the NSS, or the National Security Strategy, shouldn't be mistaken for a rigid doctrine. I agree with that, and as you say, there's a lot of contradictions in the strategy in that paper. So I don't read too much into this document. Still, I think there are several things we should notice. First of all, it's symbolically significant as a document, a statement of priorities. In the past, people say, Asia Pacific region is most important to the United States. Some other people say Middle East is more important than the Asia Pacific. Other people argue that Europe is the centerpiece of the European, the Asian, Eurasia continent. So it is most important. But this document says that the top priority should be given to the Western Hemisphere. And this is very important. It doesn't necessarily mean that Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, or even Africa, Latin America are not as important. But we should understand why this is the case, that the United States is paying more attention to the Western Hemisphere. I have my own explanations. First of all, the United States is looking inward, very much so than in the past. Looking inward, the United States is a Western hemisphere country, along with Canada and some Latin American countries, Central American countries. So this is a topic that is the top priority, especially you think about the domestic issues in the United States, curbing illegal immigration, curbing drug trafficking, especially fentanyl and other things. And Trump himself says he wants the Panama Canal back, and even he thinks that Canada should be the fifth state of the United States. That is fantasy, but this is important to notice that the United States is taking seriously what is happening around the country and within the country. This is why MAGA and his supporters come from. Regarding China, I think it is important also to notice that the United States has redefined its national security in the sense that they pay more attention to security relationship, especially economic and technological security, homeland security. In the past the administrations, when they talk about national security, they are basically talking about military security, fighting terrorism and other things, the former Soviet Union, and then the rising China in geopolitical terms. But this document emphasizes that economic security is real security, and it is also related to domestic politics of the United States. If you are talking about China, I think rhetorically, the document is less hostile to China. But in essence, I think the United States policy toward China is still one of containment. Viewing China not only from a geopolitical perspective, but from geo-economic perspective. And it is also refers to Taiwan 8 times more frequently than before. And that is, Taiwan is very important to the United States strategically in the past, but also in the current situation. Taiwan is producing computer chips and very technologically very important to the United States. And the United States has not changed its policy toward Taiwan, as some people hoped that the United States would soften its policy toward Taiwan because it needs China economically and otherwise. But I don't agree with that. I think the United States policy toward China, I mean the Trump administration policy toward China, is even more consistent with the Biden and Obama administrations, and his first term as well. That as president, now that his policy is consistent with his first term. That is what I'm thinking about.
Okay, great. It's very helpful. And particularly when you talk about the priority, it reminds me that when we talk about strategy, we need to talk about the ways and the means or the capacity to fulfill that objective. So do we see there's a tension regarding American capacity in today's world, then make this adjustment into priority? This is my first follow-up question. The second follow-up question is, do you see America, of course, the foreign policy establishment is not a monolithic. Do you see some tensions, in that document? Sounds like moving different directions or contradictions, the term I use. Your feedback. Yeah.
Yes, I think the U.S. foreign policy tends to be a series of contested moves rather than a unified strategic plan. Some people say, well, this is important. The United States has a plan. Does it really have a plan? Or does Donald Trump has a very long-range vision of the world? I don't think so. But he's in a way, he is strategic in the sense that he's thinking about the United States as the top priority and other things. So there are contradictions in the document. For instance, if you see the Western Hemisphere as the most important region for you to focus on, how about Asia? It takes more space in the document to talk about Asia, talk about China, and talk about other things. So although the United States is paying more attention to the Western Hemisphere, the importance of the Asia-Pacific region, especially China, is still very important, crucial to U.S. interests and economic interests in particular. China and the United States still have a very large scale of economic engagement and other things.
Sure. Excellent. Really very balanced assessment, very, very cautious. Now, a related question on strategy. What's the biggest misperception that the U.S. foreign policy establishment hold regarding Beijing's strategy towards the United States? Since we talk about strategy, we should also look at how U.S. perceive China because it's related.
As you and me are both political scientists, I think misperception or perception and misperception are a theoretical and conceptual puzzle to us. We often believe what is perceived real has real consequences. So perceptions are important. But what you see as misperceptions may be seen by others as right perceptions. So this is subject to your political position and political judgment. In my understanding, perceptions can be divided into different dimensions, probably 2 dimensions. One is how do you perceive the facts? This dimension is easier for the 2 parts or the different parts of the argument to reach some kind of consensus. For instance, when we talk about the growth of China's economy, The official figure is 5% a year in the last few years and in the next few years. But people in the United States, people in other countries do not necessarily agree with this figure. They say, well, it must be lower than 5%. So they could come together and make a comparison of their notes. And they can finally reach some kind of mutual understanding that what is the more accurate figure. But that is one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is intentions. That is more difficult to reach a consensus. For instance, it is very complicated. And when you talk about China's intentions, we say in China the official dialogue with the United States and in our public statements, China's political and strategic intention is to build up a global society of shared future, or 构建人类命运共同体. Within the framework of U.S.-China relations, we say we want to increase trust, mutual trust with the United States, and we want peaceful coexistence with the United States, and we have win-win cooperation with the United States. This is what we say, this is our intention. Yeah. But the Americans don't believe so. They say, well, of course, you say one thing, but we have a different perception. And they say China's strategic position is to reshape the world order by undermining U.S. position and influence and displacing U.S. power with China's predominance and hegemony. And we say, this is your misperception. We want to correct you. This is what ours is not what you are thinking about. But we cannot correct them so easily because, for instance, I have two people I know in the United States. One is Mike Pillsbury, and he wrote a book entitled The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Security to Replace Secret Strategy to Replace America as the global superpower. It was published 10 years ago, and we disagree. But it is very popular in the United States to see China this way. A younger person also I know very well is Rush Doshi. He just published a book entitled The Long Game, China's Grand Strategy to Replace America Order. Win-win. No, they say, well, we don't believe in your explanation, your intention. Your intention is just to replace the United States as a hegemon. They will cite their evidence, for instance. They say, some people in China say win-win cooperation is we win twice. You lose twice. Is that what you are thinking about? Is this? So this is what we call their misperception, and they have also, they would argue that is correct perception because they have their evidence. Sure. We have our evidence. So arguing this way may not be very helpful, actually, scholarly or politically.
Well, this may also reflect some culture perception differences that the American sports culture. How could you have the two winners? This kind of situation. Yeah, thank you. And let's move to the next question. How would you define the present day world in terms of power structure or power distribution? You see it as a unipolar, bipolar, multipolar, something else, or simply chaos? Your view?
I define the current structure of world politics as 一超多两超多强, two superpowers and many strong powers or power centers. Why not bipolar? Some people say this is bipolar, and the United States and China are two most important countries. I agree that the United States and China are two most important countries, or two most powerful countries in the world, much powerful than other countries. I mean, any other single country or cluster of countries. But it is not bipolar in the sense like the like the Soviet Union and United States in the Cold War years, because the Soviet Union had allies or satellite countries like East European countries, and in the earlier years of the Cold War, China was also an ally of the Soviet Union, and the United States had Western Europe, European countries, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Korea as its allies. So the a polar means that a pole means you have countries aligned with you or supporting you. But in this world, what the world we are talking about today, the United States alliances are weakened. Although NATO is still there, and it also has its military allies, including even Saudi Arabia and Israel and so on. But China doesn't have many allies, and we say we are a non-aligned country. We don't have any strategic ally with any country. So this is not a bipolar. This is two superpowers with other countries.
Yeah.
This is my definition. But and then that will also. So what are the other countries? I learned recently from some American friends, actually the British friend. He says this is a multi-aligned structure. For instance, European countries are allied with the United States, but they also want to strengthen relationships with China and India and other countries. So most countries are non-allied, they are double and multi-allied. They want to be aligned with the United States, they want to be aligned with China economically. So this is a structure that is very different from the past. I would emphasize that the most important division of the world is still between developed countries and developing countries, or the global north and global south, or in Samuel Huntington's words, the rest and the west, the west and the rest. I think that is still the case today.
I'm particularly intrigued by your 凸槽多强 the concept. Certainly in some areas like AI, US and China are way ahead of other countries like UK or Japan and India, etc. This is certainly reflect that. Now I have a related question in this in terms of distribution of power. President Donald Trump recently referred to US and China as G2. Now, how in your observation will Beijing likely react? And what are the Chinese concepts? Or what are Chinese concerns about the usage of G2?
I have not heard any Chinese official or government agencies in responding to G2. My guess is that most Chinese do not like the wording G2. Why? Because G2 doesn't appeal to any other country. Some people in China may want to see the United States regards China as a leading country, as a number 2 or even number 1 country in the world. We would be very proud of that. But if you look at the world and you talk to other countries, can you say this is G2 and you are not relevant, you are not important? So other countries, not a single other country I can think of would agree with this concept G2. So we have to be very careful not to use this to describe China's mentality of the world. And it is simply Trump's wording that will not be accepted by China.
Yeah, we have the constraint of time. It's fascinating. I really want to discuss this with you more. And in a way that when we talk about G2, should be like a governance, take responsibility. But the time that the US want to withdraw the climate change and public health in WHO and etc., that it sounds like it's really not a G2 in terms of governance, share burden, provide public goods and etc.
Exactly, you're quite all right.
Okay, yeah. Now let's move to the third question. In your extensive interview with the Contemporary American Review, 当代美国 评论. It's really excellent interview happened in May, I believe, like 5 or 6 months ago. You noted, I quote, the combination of financial power, technological power, and the political power is reshaping the political and economic landscape of the United States, end quote. In the same interview, you also outline some deep-rooted problems, a very long list in the United States, such as vicious partisan politics, serious economic disparities, high inflation, racial and ethnic tensions, the rampancy of violence, the rise of religious extremism, cultural wars, loss of morality, and so on. Now, how would you reconcile these constructive and destructive forces in the United States? How long will it take for the country, United States, to get out of such a mess? And also, related to China, for China, should the Chinese worry about the American strengths or American weaknesses at this moment?
Well, Li Cheng, you list longer than I did in the United States. So
No.
you are in a better position.
No.
But as a veteran US watcher in China, I think all these issues, all these problems you cite from my writing are facts. As I say, these probably are not misperceptions. These are perceptions most Americans also
Agree.
agree. So Americans admit them. And I emphasize them because I think this is a United States not recognizable in the past. I went to the United States first time in the 1984.
Yeah.
So as compared to the United States at the time, this is not the same country. This is unrecognizable. And I talk to the Americans, I say, I don't like this kind of United States. I miss the past. And they agree with me. They say, well, they are even angry, even more disappointed at the United States today. So the problems are there, and they accept that. So what is important here is that this United States, to me, is a miniature of the world. That is, all the problems happening in the United States are happening elsewhere in other countries. For instance, the gap between the rich and the poor, social inequality, economic inequality, it is enlarging in every part of the world. In Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, everywhere. So this is not typical of the United States. And people are divided by social and ethnic identities. This is identity politics. This is also universal in other countries, in Europe, in Russia, everywhere. And the rise of right-wing politicians. For instance, we see in Japan the rise of right-wing politicians like Prime Minister Takaishi. And in other countries, we see similar problems, similar tendencies. And, a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, we talked about political correctness. That was that different what we are seeing as political correctness today. The political correctness today is nationalism. At that time, it's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, and so on. But so we are changing very rapidly. So this is not simply the United States problem. This is a problem of many other countries. So my attitude, I love China, of course. And I also have some feelings about the United States because I watched the country, I studied the country. I don't want to see the United States continue to be like this. I'm not gloating. I'm not mocking the United States, but I understand why other people do not like the United States because it is not relevant to their daily life. They say, well, the United States, the more the weaker the United States will be better in Chinese perspective. I can understand that, but I personally hope that the United States will come back to the old
Sure.
days, not exactly to the old days, but have
Sure.
a balance.
Yeah.
Political balance, economic balance, social balance.
So well said. Well, the fact that you talk about more problems is really give us some clues how you think at the moment. Let's move to the last question. Now, also, if I may, could you stay 10 minutes longer, Jisi? Because
I have
want
no
to finish.
problem. I have no problem.
Okay, good. good.
I mean, the
And,
listeners
whole
may not
audience
be,
still here, but
may
if you
not
have some
be
other
interested.
things, they can leave. But I want
so
to
much.
have a 10 minutes extension because I want to give the audience the chance to ask a question. But I still have 5 minutes. Last question, bigger question, but also some one-word question later on. Now, I must ask a strategic question, but largely from personal perspective, your personal experience. Could someone come to see the photo? Yeah, I want to show the photo in the book, in the Michael Lampton's chapter. It's your family photo taken in 1958. And it's really quite moving and remind me, similar photos in intellectual families in China during that period. But also, not only just intellectual family, but also later on, the middle class families, they also as David said, that they encounter America, over the past 3 decades. So you witness that the extensive contact through education, culture, people-to-people exchanges, and engagement. But sadly, this unprecedented intimate connectivity has not led to deep trust and respect. Instead, the bilateral relationship has drastically deteriorated in the recent decade. And this makes some of us wonder about the effects and the significance of these exchanges. Now, however, but we may also look at it differently. We can argue that without these profound people-to-people exchanges, U.S.-China relations could be even worse. Now, what's your view, Jisi?
Well, you could have many reflection on that. I'm somewhat contradictory with myself. I believe, first of all, that what you say is right. There should be more interactions between the two peoples, official and non-official in dialogues, attractive dialogues, scholarly exchanges. They are all right. But, remember the mid-1910s, that is about 10 years ago, there were 2 million travelers between the United States and China each way. 2 million Americans came to China. 2 million Americans went to 2 million Chinese went to America, and the other way around. And there were 400,000 Chinese students studying in the United States.
Yeah.
So I'm somewhat nostalgic about these old days. But I'm very serious. I will ask myself the question: do more understandings of the other country lead to more respect and less competition? And then can we reduce conflict by engaging each other more? My answer is not necessarily. No, for instance, I just cited Rush Doshi and Mike Pillsbury. They read Chinese well, they understand Chinese well, but they have a different view. And in these few years, they are more influential. And there are more hawks on both sides toward each other. That is, the more we know the United States, do we really necessarily love the United States more or less? I don't know. Because, for instance, they say you don't know too much about the United States. I know more because I read their internal documents. I read their social media. They hate China. They say nasty things about China. And the American colleagues may also say the same thing to us, saying, well, now we know more about China, and the Chinese don't like us. The Chinese come back to they get their information, they get their technology, but they join the PLA against the United States. That is what they say. And if we have more access to classified documents, we would be shocked how China is described in the United States. So coming to the old days, for instance, when Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Henry Kissinger, and Richard Nixon, they were together. They didn't know each other that well, but they could understand each other's strategic intentions, and they trusted each other to the extent they were talking about the Soviet Union or the global politics. But now we know each other much more. So, and when I first came to the United States, I talked to many Americans. I respected them. I even I know they were seen as my teachers and mentors. But if the younger people go to the United States today, do they really see the Americans simply as teachers and mentors? They will say they are peers. No, you know, I speak English more than you speak Chinese. Is that all right? Yes, sure. So I know, and we should be prouder to ourselves because we know much more about the United States. So
Well,
that means that more knowledge about the other country may not produce more understanding or even more respect for each other. I may be wrong, but this is my understanding of the problem.
well, it's fascinating to see that unconventional view certainly make us to think. But I will say that if we talk about bi-boundary, Michael Pittsburgh and also Michael Lamberton, we call David Lamberton, Michael Lamberton, these are the two different levels of knowledge of China. So it reminds me the American saying, little knowledge is dangerous things. I mean, when you're getting deeper, probably you have appreciate more. And I still a strong believer for education and culture exchanges. And I actually believe, I think you probably also agree somewhat. If U.S. can avoid a military conflict, U.S.-China, largely because of these 4 decades, 5 decades people's exchanges. Now, here's my one answer question. We just want to provide a percentage. There are 6 questions. Number 1, percentage of the likelihood for a military confrontation or war, we just talked about, between the United States and China in the next decade or so. What's your percentage?
I'm hesitating, but I would give it 30%.
Wow. It's quite big.
Too much, maybe
Okay.
too much.
The percentage chance
hope
that
I'm
President
wrong.
Donald Trump will have a third term,
10% to 5%.
5 to 10%.
Right.
Percentage chance that the NATO will dismantle in the next decade or so. You mentioned about NATO.
10 to 20%.
10 to 20%. The percentage of chance that the United States will experience a major financial crisis, like what happened in the 1929 Great Depression.
I would give it 20%.
20%. Even less than the military confrontation between China and the United States. It is almost certain that President Trump will visit China next April. What's the percentage of likelihood that President Xi Jinping will visit the United States next year?
If he comes in April, I think it's 80% chance of Xi Jinping, President Jinping, will visit the United States next year.
Will likely be sometimes in the summer or in the end of the year?
Maybe end of the year, because
Okay.
our president might go to the United States for joining the G20 meeting.
Jason, yeah, okay. The last one, the percentage of chance that the Russian-Ukraine war will come to end next year.
It depends on how you define the
End.
end of the war. I would give 50% chance of ceasefire. Or temporary ceasefire. It's not the end of the war. I don't know.
Wow. Thank you, Professor Wang, for really carefully answering all these questions with substance, with your expertise, with your candidness. Now we have about 10, maybe 10 minutes for audience question, please. Maybe 5 or 10. Yes, please. Yeah, please introduce yourself first. Yeah.
All right. Hello, Jisi. I'm
Jisi.
from Capistan. 高金文.
Yeah. Okay.
你记得我吗？
Yes, I see.
Okay, you see, Can you see me?
Could you see?
Yes, yes.
Okay, hello.
Hi, hi.
Really, it's a pity you can't make it to Hong Kong. I hope next time you will be able to come here. Anyway, I'm still here. And I have two questions, very brief. The first one about intentions. Do you think Xi Jinping's intention is to solve the Taiwan issue within his term in office, or instead of leaving it to the next generation? That's my first question. Second question about Europe. What is your take on the national security strategy of the US on Europe? Were you surprised, and do you think that the consequence will be that the Europeans are going to move closer to China, or they will stay in between the US and China? Thank you.
I think the European Union and Great Britain are still US allies. We are not allies of the European countries. So this is important to remember, that China is not in the middle between the United States and Europe. China is leaning more toward the United States than to China, although we share a lot of common interests. This is my response to the question. The first question about Taiwan, I think my understanding of China's policy is still peaceful unification and one country, two systems. But in the social media, there are many people who say we should take over Taiwan militarily as soon as possible. I understand why they are thinking about this, but I don't think our official policy has changed in that direction. Peace still very much important to the mainland Taiwan relationship, but we are against Taiwan, the pro-Taiwan independent forces who are making trouble for us. We have to fight against them.
Thank you for very clearly answer that very difficult question. And any other one? Yeah, please. Yeah. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Cui Jiawei, and currently I study at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and I'm the student of Professor Jean-Pierre.
Okay.
So I just want to ask a question about the term of the containment, because right now we know that the United States, they believe that China as their main competitor, strategic competitor. And we can see that many scholars right now, they use the word containment. They believe that United States, they are using the containment strategy towards China. But I also want to ask, because we know that the containment strategy, or to say the strategy right now, it was a difference with the containment strategy in the Cold War. So I just want to know that is it the proper term we use about the strategy the United States implemented right now, or to say maybe we can use other words, for example, like balancing or limiting and other things. Thank you very much.
I should still prefer to use the wording containment. It is not exactly the containment policy of the United States toward the Soviet Union in the Cold War years, because the economic interdependence between the United States and China is so deep and so broad that we cannot cut off all the economic and social connections. So, but in essence, the United States emphasizes strategic competition against China, and I think that is my understanding of their position. That will not change.
Wonderful. We also have one question in here, but do we have the online question? Anyone send? No? Okay. So yeah, but before your question, I want to have a follow-up question, because I noticed when you give a high percentage, 30% of the possible military conflict, even war, but also you said that the Taiwan Strait, the tensions, the crisis probably can be resolved through peaceful way. Does that mean that you probably worry about more in East China Sea with Japan and South China Sea with some countries? Is my reading correct? The chance for conflict even higher in these two regions than Taiwan Strait.
Yes, I am more concerned about the rise of pro-independent forces in Taiwan. Some of them deny their identity as Chinese, and the cultural tendencies there are not, very, very encouraging. But I still believe that we have a, we have to be very strategically patient because after all, they are Chinese. They are ethnic Chinese and culturally Chinese, and we can get along with each other. They are part of Taiwan is part of China. Taiwan is not an independent country, so the two parts of China can finally talk to each other and then gradually integrate with each other. And that is my hope.
Okay, thank you so much. The last question, please.
Hi, Professor Wang and Professor Li. Thank you for the insightful conversation. So I am currently studying public administration at Hong Kong U. I have a question regarding education, but more on a personal level. So in today's world, for a Chinese student who wants to study Chinese politics or Chinese economy or US-China relations, do you still think US schools is a good choice? This question goes to both Professor Li and Professor Wang. Thank you.
Yeah,
So like, what
Professor
are the
Li-
advantages of studying Chinese politics or US-China relations in China versus in US?
Well, my answer to the question is, if you want to understand China's politics, you stay in China as long as possible, because it's not difficult to understand China's politics in China, but it's very difficult to understand China's politics in the United States. Of course, you can study what they think about China, but you have to have first-hand information about China itself. And then you go to the United States to read their literature, to talk to their people, and you make a comparison. Then you have a more balanced picture.
Yeah, excellent answer. Actually, I have a more ambivalent answer to your question. On the one hand, I strongly favor education exchanges. I do believe that China's middle class size is so big, there will always be a family send their children to United States. But if I have children, I will hesitate to send them to United States for a number of reasons. And because of time limits, I will not articulate. So I caught up in this kind of paradox. So again, I'm a big fan. I hope that the U.S. will change its attitude to not regard Chinese students as spies, as they come to steal American technologies. These people completely out of touch with reality. And also, I'm worried about the violence and the gun issues and et cetera. And also that one thing I really applaud, the summit, especially high-level, state-level visit. If there's no such kind of visit, I sometimes worry that the education exchange may be shut down by some of the policymakers. You see the bills in the U.S. Congress still going on, so that will be interruptive. So with that, Jisi, as always, I learned so much from you. I read basically everything you have written, and I really find your chapters fascinating. Your candidness, your thoughtfulness, along with some other chapters in the book. The book and David, it's really timely and timeless. And so, Jisi, I hope that I will see you in Beijing or you come to Hong Kong next time. But also that because I cannot present to you a small token of appreciation, but I wanted to do that with Deborah and also with Yifan. But I cannot thank you enough, Jisi. I know that you are very busy, still writings, speeches, and research and many other things. So thank you so much. If we come to Hong Kong next time, I still hope that we will feature you in person and maybe have a dialogue with the American counterpart and being Michael Lampton again, I hope. But thank you so much. And so stay for a few minutes if you want. And thank you. And for the audience, no one left, I noticed. And also thank for those in the live stream. Yeah. 2,000, we have the 2,000 people watch, but also the video will be available. So again, Jisi, you are so provocative and along with the excellent book. co-edited by my dear friend Debbie. So let's have a photo. I want to present a small gift for. So much. Yeah.
Professor Wang, could you turn your camera back on, please? We want to take a picture with you. Thank you.
But this way, I'll switch to the PowerPoint. Okay. Right. Maybe the one with his name. Okay. You start a poll a bit so that I think yes. Okay. Now this is from this.
Oh, maybe you can stand here. You can stand here in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, we always maybe here. Okay, Professor Wang is back.
He's coming back. He's back.
Yeah, wait a minute.
That's the best. Oh, good. There you go. Okay, good. Thank you all. Thank you. Hi, Jisi. See you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Send regards to Terry. Thank you.
Yeah, this is our